Afternoon, Mark here from Exel, and a red wine tasting, and a slightly unusual one in that what I am about to taste is a Beaujolais. Now, I don't drink a lot of Beaujolais, and we don't sell a lot of Beaujolais, and you may not drink a lot of Beaujolais either. It's a bit of a, well, it's a funny category these days. It was all the rage, and of course, it's rather fallen out of fashion, and I think rather like, you could argue, elements of Chianti, certainly Cava, maybe bits of Rioja, and a number of other categories, Chardonnay, Riesling. It's a category that's been brought, not into disrepute, too strong a way of putting it, but has been cheapened, discredited by some of the cheaper, more everyday offerings that one finds. But like all of those categories I just mentioned, the top end and some of the better wines in those categories are still every bit as brilliant as they ever were, and don't deserve to be that disregarded. This is a Morgon from Domaine de la Beche, also trading under the name of Olivier Depardon, who is the owner and the viticulteur. And I guess it's rather reopened my eyes to the world of Cru Beaujolais. We talk of Cru Beaujolais in that there are different strata within Beaujolais. There's the classic Beaujolais Nouveau that many people know, that's rushed over in the autumn. It's not that. Then there's obviously Beaujolais Village, or Beaujolais generally, and Beaujolais Village, which are sort of slightly more blanket categorizations. And then there are the 10 Beaujolais Cru, the villages of the northern part of Beaujolais, and names known to many people: Fleury, Bruy, Côte de Bruy, Renier, Saint-Amour. This is a Morgon, which is one of the two Cru generally known for being a bit heavier, a bit thicker, and generally a bit more serious and heavyweight in the world of Beaujolais. What's unusual about this one is that within Morgon there are 6 sub-areas, which are probably better referred to as climat or lieu-dit in the French, sub-areas, and this takes wines from each of those 6 and blends them together. What is more, it is a cuvée vieille vigne, which is to say that it comes from old vines, and those vines in this case are all 70 to 100 years old, which gives you that much greater concentration in the wines. So, interesting, and it is something about the way in which Beaujolais is made which creates something of its distinctive set of flavours, but also arguably has led to some of that discrediting, and that is a lot of the cheaper stuff is made by carbonic maceration. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but it's effectively the way you don't break open the grapes, you put them in carbon dioxide, and you get this intracellular fermentation which creates these very unusual flavours which are symptomatic, shall we say, of classic cheaper Beaujolais, these kind of bubblegum, kirsch, very, very rich fruit flavours. Well, quite a lot of it better Beaujolais is made using a spin-off of that method, semi-carbonic maceration, in which standard fermentation is carried out, but the grapes are not broken open. They sit in something of a blanket of the carbon dioxide that is created by the fermentation in any event, and you still get some proportion of those slightly more fruity flavours, and that does show in this wine. Interesting to look at, as you will see, I hope from that, it is remarkably dark for a Beaujolais. I mean, I tend to associate Beaujolais with quite red fruit flavours, strawberry, raspberry and so on. You look at that automatically looks just that little bit deeper. It's still quite transparent, you can see through it, but it has a real depth of colour to it. It's 2019, it's a fairly young wine, and on the nose, you know, there's a big fruit hit there. And you get some of those very lively fruit flavours. I mean, the bubblegum flavour is not there, but there is a real lively fruit hit. And it is all about, in my view, cherries, black cherries, and something of a, I don't know, deep, dark red fruit hit to it as well. You might say raspberries, tayberries, loganberries, that kind of thing. Really attractive on the nose. Definitely that Beaujolais character, but there is something a bit more serious about the nose as well. On the palate, really interesting. Okay, so it's got acidity. It's going to have acidity. It's from the Gamay grape. It's got some zing and some zip to it. The sort of acidity that you might more regularly associate with Italian wines. But That acidity is really well in keeping, in balance with a really big, rich, fruity hit, and a really ripe fruit hit. I mean, that is dark, deep, almost heavy, very ripe fruit to it. It's really attractive. It's quite bold on the palate, and certainly much deeper, much denser than I've experienced with most Beaujolais. Tannins are light, but definitely there. There's not a grippiness to them, but there's a little bit of tannin going on in there. And this has a bearing which is definitely more serious. It's a denser, heavier, more serious wine than I've typically experienced with Beaujolais. I wouldn't want to get carried away in stressing that this is not Bordeaux. This is not Barossa Shiraz. It's not that heavy. But as Beaujolais goes, it's a lot denser. It sits really well with fruit. You might see that there's not an awful lot left in the bottle. I found this particularly attractive. It's really good with lighter meals, but also, you know, I've put this with some red meats and works really well with it. This has got a lot more going on than your typical Beaujolais. It's just dense, it's attractive, it's fruity, it's really interesting. It's a fabulous Beaujolais. We are selling this at just £13.50. It would be easy to look at that and say, well, that's pretty cheap. Is it actually any good? And the reason that we sell it at that price is because we import it directly and we don't mark it up particularly highly. If we were taking this via an importer, that would probably be another £3, maybe £4 or even £5 more expensive. So don't look at the price and think, well, hang on, this is not as good as a £17 or £18 Beaujolais. The difference is we're taking it directly and we can pass that directly on to you. I think this is great. It's really interesting and yeah, one for the shortlist.